In this HVAC training video, we're going over how to make a 4-piece transition fitting in order to connect a gas furnace to an evaporator coil during a changeout. And we're also going to be using our new invention, the advanced folding tool that we worked with HVACR on in order to get it out to the public. And this one has a large mouth in order to be able to make a modified Pittsburgh seam here and here. So we can just slip this fitting in. So we don't need any S-lock at the corners in order to connect this transition fitting. We're also going to be using our Hillmore pocket brake, our hand seamers, our folding tool, and large tin snips. And now we're going to get started. The easiest way to learn how to make a transition fitting is to have one corner matching. And so you can see this back corner, we're level. We're also level right here in the front, and we also have the back lined up. And so that does not mean that the opening sizes between here and here are going to match. And that's the whole point of learning how to make this transition fitting, because we're going to be pitching downwards from here to here, and we're also going to be decreasing our size from here over into here. And so we're also going to be making this transition fitting 12 inches long so that there's room so that the airflow can make it to the different parts of the coil as well. We are not going to be blocking part of the coil with the exhaust pipe. So the exhaust pipe can come up and pitch up right here out of the way of the coil in case this ever needed to be removed for servicing. Now in this instance, we could potentially just block off the bottom and put this tight up against the furnace, and you can see that the airflow would come right in here and over into here. However, you would not want to block off this section right here if you had this coil higher. So you would not want to have this bottom matched up with the furnace, because you would be completely blocking the airflow from making it directly into this slab of the coil. But in the instance of a changeout, a lot of times we're stuck with the position, and that's why in this video we're going to be going over how to make a transition that's maybe about 1 foot long. We're going to start off by measuring for our top piece. We're going to make 4 pieces in total, and so the top one is the easiest. And so we don't have to get super confused with angles and a bunch of measurements off the get-go for the whole transition fitting. You just take it one step at a time. So the opening size here is 20 inches. We add a 1/2 inch just to make sure that we're not binding up when we put this in. So 20.5 on that side, and on this side, the opening size is 19. And then here we have 12 inches. And then after that, once we lay this out on the table, we'll add our dimensions for our ears in order to be able to screw it onto this and onto here. So here we have our sheet of metal, our 20.5 inch side for the furnace, our 19 inch side for the coil, our 12 inch as far as our width here, and then this will be the unknown length. And so as long as you start with a 90-degree angle, you can just, you'll just find out what this is when you go ahead and cut it and measure it. In this case, it's very close to 12 inches. We also have our 1 inch here, which we're going to fold over a 1/2 and then another 1/2 to make an ear. Same with that side. And these sides are 1 5/8 each, because we're going to make our modified Pittsburgh seam over here on this corner and on this corner. So let's go ahead and cut it out. I typically don't mark up our sheets of metal as much as this right here. This is just in order so that you can see the measurements. We use our long straight shears for this, because that's what's going to make the nicest cuts. Always make sure to bend your corners like this instead of just twisting them like this, because if you twist them like that, you end up with a curlicue that you end up getting stuck with or potentially cut later on your hand. To make our bends, we're going to use the advanced folding tool here and also the standard folding tool. So on this side and on this side, we're going to flip it over first. And we're going to take the 1 inch side and fold that over. We want to make sure that that sheet metal is in the little diamond so you can see it, which it is right there. Push down on the table and fold over. Now this is 26 gauge sheet metal. You can use 28 or even 30, but I typically prefer to use 26 for its rigidity. The lower the gauge size, the thicker the metal. And then what I do is I use our hand seamers right here to fold it over just a little bit more. And of course, I don't usually mark the pieces of the metal that are going to be exposed later, but in this case, I'm just doing it so you can see it. Then we take our advanced folding tool with the large mouth, put that right in here. You don't push down on the table real hard because you have to let that kind of flap of metal fold over, this flap right here, and then you can kind of crimp it down. So once again, right in those little diamonds, fold this over just like that. This side is a little easier, like the modified Pittsburgh seams, if you just take your handbrakes and just do it without the folding tool. Next, we're gonna fold this side. We're gonna use the 3/8 side of our standard folding tool. You could even use the 1/2 inch of the advanced folding tool if you'd like. Now we'll use our 3/8 on this side, and the other thing is this piece of metal is longer than this, so what we're going to do is we will take our hand seamers to finish this side out, just like that. You can see that the result right here, and so sometimes it kind of pops up on an angle like that. Instead of doing what we just did, you can just use a 2-foot flat bar. While we have it on this side, we're going to need to make some cross breaks. So the whole point is it's going to make the metal more rigid. And we're going to be doing this on the inside part of the sheet metal. So basically we're just going to take our pocket brake right here. And so this tool has 2 wheels. And if you press down, you can actually indent the metal in order to make your cross brake. So you can just eye it up just like that. Another way to do it is if you just take a folding tool, just like this, and pull up and kind of press this down at the same time. You can make a cross brake just with this, but in this case, we're going to be using our pocket brake. Take our folding tool right here, which has the large mouth. Once again, this is the advanced folding tool. What we're going to do is we're just folding this upwards just like that. So that's one side. Here's our other side. So that's how we're going to screw it into this side and this side. And of course you could just make these 1/2 inch instead of doing like a double hem here, but this just makes it so that it's not sharp when you're screwing it into the system. So basically this section right here is going to fit right in there like that. And these pieces right here, these little 1/2 inch sections, are going to get folded over to be able to attach it to our other seams. We don't have to put this in one piece at a time, but you surely can if you'd like. For our next side, we're going to go to the back side because remember, this is the corner that we're starting out with, and this is the easiest side. So you do that top piece, then the back side, and then you move on from there. And so right here, if you can see that bottom ear is up above, it's right about 13 1/8. So we're going to make this side 13 1/2, and so that gives us room for that 1/2 inch hem in order to screw it into the furnace. So that side's 13 1/2, and on this side, if you can see right here, that's about 16 1/4. So we're going to go 16 1/2, and you can see the bottom of the coil box is 17. So once again, that gives us that 1/2 inch in order to screw into the box. So 13 1/2, 16 1/2, and then 12 across. Now, right now, we're at about 12 1/4, right about 12, but we're going to keep our measurements at 12, just like we did with our top piece. So here's the top, and this would be folded over a 1/2 inch to go into our modified Pittsburgh seam. This would go against the furnace at 13 1/2. This would go up against the evaporator coil at 16 1/2 inches. We would fold this 1 inch into 2 1/2 inch hems, so it would be a folded over hem here and a folded over hem here. And this would be to create another modified Pittsburgh seam on the bottom of this fitting. So we're going to go ahead and cut this out. Now you'll notice when we measured this part right here, this 1 5/8, it's from the line this way. It's not directly straight down. It's in this direction right here because it is on an angle. And you can also notice that every one of these is not like an exact square, so we cut it inwards a little bit so when you make your bends, they don't bind up in the corners. So instead of cutting out maybe like 90 degrees right here in this corner, we'll cut out maybe about 120 degrees. Then on this side, we can fold this over this way. Now, if you can look inside that little area right there, we can close up the seam. Now the reason we fold with the folding tool on the table is so that we have a firm surface to push against, and then we also use like a piece of cardboard or something like that for our pocket breaks so the metal can flex, and so that we can easily make these breaks. And remember, what you're really doing is you're just kind of making the metal more rigid by these little breaks. And we take our larger mouth right here, and we're going to bend that upwards. Just like that. And then this last section right here needs to be folded down. So we'll go like this, and we'll use our 1/2 inch side for our small mouth. And that's it. So we have enough videos where we are putting the 4 pieces together. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to put each piece into the system and connect it one at a time. The next thing we're going to do is slip this little 1/2 inch piece into the modified Pittsburgh seam. Now we can hit over this Pittsburgh seam. So it's nice and sealed. The next part that we're going to make is this bottom section. It'll just make it easier to get that piece in. And so we're going to go with 20.5, like we had mentioned before. And the same thing on this side, which was 19. So that'll be the opening size. Now, as far as the angle here, that is going to be about 12.5, it looks like. And back here, right about 12 5/8. So we'll go with the smaller size at about 12.5. And then we'll also bend our ears, and we'll need our 1/2 inch section to slip into the modified Pittsburgh seam. We're also going to place a Pittsburgh seam over on this side. The thing that we want to remember is that this is going to be your 90-degree angle because the coil and the furnace were straight in the back. And so over here is where you're going to have your offset, right over here in the front. This side here goes against the furnace, and this side right here is from the furnace to the evaporator coil on that angle. And then here we have our 19 inches for the coil. And we have 12.5 from here to here. That's not necessarily this angle, it's just straight from that line right over to this line. We have the 1 inch and the 1 inch to be able to fold over our hems. They'll eventually end up being 1/2 inch, and they'll be soft on the outside, right? That round edge, so nobody can get accidentally cut on that. This part right here is going to go into our Pittsburgh seam, and we're going to make the other side of our Pittsburgh with this section right here that's 1 5/8. If you were not making Pittsburgh seams, it would be pretty simple. You would just cut this ear off, and the next one you would just add 1 inch to it and fold it over to be able to go into the S-lock cleat. But in this instance, we are not using any S-lock whatsoever and making our own Pittsburgh seams with the advanced folding tool. Since this is going to be the inside, we're going to take these 1/2-inch sections right here and here, we're going to fold them over inwards, and we're actually going to be using the 3/8 part of the folding tool. So our conventional folding tool right here, we'll just use that 3/8 side. Once again, this would be easier to use if this was a thinner gauge sheet metal. So we can use this, but in this case we'll use our 2-foot folding bar. So you can start seeing that seam tighten up right here. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually pressing the bottom of this onto the table, so I take pressure off my wrist as I'm tightening this down. So all I'm really doing is just kind of pushing downwards. As well, anytime you're making your modified Pittsburgh seams, you're going to be folding the 1-inch inwards. You're going to do that first. You'll take the advanced folding tool with a large mouth. So you can see that seam right there. We're going to close that up. Just like that. Before we make any more bends in this, we're going to use our pocket brake to make the cross brakes. Next we use our advanced folding tool again. So you can see we're on a slight angle that way, and same with this one. And that's because it's going to be pitched like this. The next thing that we need to do is bend this inwards at our 1/2-inch mark. Now we can place our bottom section in. We can now fold this over. There it is, nice and tight. Next we have our last piece right in the front, and it's simple because we just bend a 1/2-inch here and a 1/2-inch here, and it'll go right into both of these Pittsburgh seams. And so we have our measurement right here, it's 13.5. This one right here, we already know it's 16.5, right down to that seam. And we already know that this is 12, and we also know because of our last sheet that this down here is 12.5. So our unknown angle right here, we can just go ahead and measure if we weren't sure. Here's our furnace side right here at 13.5, and then we have our coil side at 16.5. We actually measured 12.125, so the gap opened up a little bit, and so we got 12.125 here, and then this lower angle, just like our bottom piece, is 12.5. Now we're just going to have a 1/2-inch here and a 1/2-inch here to slip into the Pittsburgh seams, and then the 1-inch on this side and the 1-inch on this side will be a folded over 1/2-inch hem when we're all done. So let's cut this one out. So we have this all marked out. We typically don't mark out this because this is actually going to be the front where everybody's going to be able to see. I'm only doing that for the sake of the video. And in reference to this, we're going to first bend these sections over to the inside. And so we're going to use our 3/8 part of our folding bar. Now we're going to take our pocket brake on the inside so that the cross brake is pointed outwards. Then we take the large mouth of the advanced folding tool. And then the next thing is we are going to bend this one and this one inwards. So we're going to take the 1/2 inch part of the advanced folding tool. By the way, this folding tool, the advanced folding tool, is available over at TruTechTools.com, and you can use the code acservicetech for 6% off. And here we got this side. And there's our last piece. In order to get off any Sharpie marks, you can just re-moisten it with your Sharpie and then rub it off with a towel. The other thing is, what you could do is you could get a little bit of oil, like WD-40 or another type of oil. And you can just rub that on there until that Sharpie mark comes off. I do like to use penetrating oil, just in general. And that'll work as well. Here we have our front piece. We're going to go ahead and put that on next, and we have our little 1/2 inch flanges, and we're just going to go ahead and slip that into our Pittsburgh seam. So that's our top right there, and I'm just going to tap this down. That'll kind of make sure it doesn't pop back out. And then we can get our bottom. So we're all locked in. I'm going to go ahead and finish putting this in. This cross break is outwards, and so we can just go ahead and seam this right here. And then to seal this all up, we'll add duct mastic to all the seams and openings, and then you would rub that in and add your insulation and tape that in place as well. I hope this video on making a sheet metal transition has helped, and if you're looking for our new advanced folding tool with our large mouth in order to bend the Pittsburgh seams and also for making end caps that don't require any Slock, make sure to check out the links down in the description section below. Also, make sure to check out our new 2nd edition Refrigerant Charging and Service Procedures for Air Conditioning book, which is available over at acservicetech.com and also on Amazon. Now, this book covers all the new updates in regard to A2O refrigerants, R32 and R454B, as well as gauge stubs and T use and wireless probes and apps and all-in-one digital manifolds. And so it covers a lot of new procedures that we're using in the field. So make sure to check out the new 2nd edition Refrigerant Charging and Service Procedures for Air Conditioning book.